where the market's at. And I often say to people, which market? Because there are multiple markets within Australia. There are multiple markets within each capital city. So I'll talk and drill down into the different price ranges, the different geographic locations, the different style of property. But generally speaking, I mean, Australia's in a pretty good state. We've been through a few tough years like the rest of the world. Property has been knocked around a little bit, but not as much perhaps as some other asset classes. And I think we're at the beginning of the next cycle, recovery, growth, 3 to 5 years. I think we're at the beginning of that. Sydney's probably leading the way slightly from the rest of the country. Sydney's a little bit further progressed with regard to the demand out there. But there are cities like Melbourne, the market's very, very strong. Cities like Brisbane and the Gold Coast that I think actually offer outstanding value for people that have been hit pretty hard, and I think are going to bounce back very strongly over the next 12 to 18 months. So I think there are some basic things there. Nowadays, via the internet, there's really no excuse for not doing all your due diligence and research. I mean, as a buyer, you should be turning up with better information, perhaps better educated than the agent, because you're focused on a specific type of property and price range and area, and agents often have to handle multiple price ranges and properties. So you really should be researching very hard to make sure you know what good value looks like. I also try and give some practical tips. I suggest people don't look for bargains, because bargains are rarely great properties for the future. They're normally things that are cheap because no one wants to buy them. So I think as the market improves, I say to people, just look for a fair market value property that has capital growth opportunities written all over it. I'm a great believer in capital growth as opposed to yield. Yield is relevant and important, but at the end of the day, whether your investment is yielding you 4% or 5%, it's not going to change your world. If you pick the next growth suburb or one of the next hot sweet spots around the country, I mean, you can find that your wealth can increase, almost overnight. Over the next few years, you can have a dramatic uplift in your wealth. Suburbs look like, being prepared to take some calculated risks. We know the obvious ones. It's not hard to know that Albert Park's a great area to buy in, or in Sydney, Paddington. But what's the next Albert Park for Melbourne? And have a look around it. What areas are sort of on the fringe geographically? Where are the sort of trendy new cafes, retail outlets, strip shopping starting to move in? What's got the feeling and what's got the earmarks of a great capital growth area? What areas are going to benefit from infrastructure that might be about to be put into the city? So have a look at, is there a new light rail? Is there a new rail system being put in? Is there a new roadway that's going to make an area better, or make an area that's going to be more accessible to the CBD? Have a look at all of those sort of things, and then be prepared to take a couple of calculated risks as to where you're prepared to invest your money. Especially cities like Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane become bigger, harder to access to get in and out of. A lot of people want to have themselves right there on the doorstep of the city, and of course that's where a lot of the cultural pursuits and a lot of the activities and the best restaurants are going to be within that sort of 10-kilometre radius. So I always say to people, draw a circle around the CBD that you choose, and all of those cities are great investments, and have a look for where are the areas that are less fashionable at this point, and what's happening in those areas. Are they heavily industrial but becoming more residential, or are they heavy industrial and they're going to remain that way? Is something going to happen that sparks off interest in a suburb that adjoins a really popular, trendy area? So have a look around, get out on the street, drive around, walk around, go to cafes, speak to different agents, really research the market until you actually know more than the agent. A lot of people call them grungy suburbs. They're often trendy for renters, and they are often near universities and educational pursuits, and they sort of haven't quite had the polish put on them yet. But they've got really strong growth opportunities. And I mean, in Sydney, it's areas like Dulwich Hill and St Peters and Tempe that they're not the Paddingtons and the Surrey Hills, but they're only about 4 or 5 kilometres away, and they're about 40% less expensive to buy into those areas. So that's what I'm looking for.